Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of our new podcast. I'm Retty4. With me today is GreyJellow91
Hey guys.
and Antoine Bandelet.
Be water, my friends.
Take us away, Matt.
Okay, so this is our Fanalysis of Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is the next episode of that, and we're covering the second episode of Season 1, which is entitled The Avatar Returns, which in many ways is the continuation, conclusion, resolution of the events that happened in Episode 1, which was called The Boy in the Iceberg. So taking us away for talking points and structure of the plot is Antoine.
All right, guys. So our first scene established Aang and Katara coming back to the village where they're kind of like, yo, you just set that flare. The Fire Nation is going to come back here and like demolish us like they always do. Katara or Aang, being the peaceful guy that he is, goes like, hey, you know what? I don't want any issues. Sokka, you don't trust me. Villagers, you don't trust me. That's cool. I'm out. I'll just peace out, And I thought that was actually kind of cool because we see his character again. Like, we already know that he's like, this monk guy, but just see that how he deals with conflict in situations. And sometimes you'll have people like talk back or fuel the fire of that conflict. He's like, no, I'm just gonna peace out, like peace, man, like peace and love. I'm out.
He's very aware.
So I thought that was really cool.
He's very aware of their situation and what it's doing, not only to the tribe and the whole thing that he supposedly brought to them, but for Katara and Sokka as well. Even when Katara offers to join and leave with him, he's like, I don't want to cause any problems here. I'll just go. It's fine. And then because she's held back by as I said the previous episode, she's held back by the whole family thing. He's not got those ties, but he's aware that other people do, and it's a further expression of Aang as the character, in a very nice way.
It is, it is nice that they examine both sides of that coin in terms of like his instinct is to avoid conflict, and sometimes it can be the more adult thing to do, whereas other times the series makes a point of challenging his view on that matter and like whether or not it's a character flaw. And here, it's really kind of neither. Like you can kind of there's no right or wrong here, but it's also it's established like that. We kind of touched on this last episode that there's sort of an Aang Katara thing going on even early on, but he's willing to leave. It's not like instant I'm in love with you, which is like totally childish that you might find in a lesser series. So he's portrayed as a human, which is nice.
Yeah.
And same with Sokka. He's a human as well. Like I like that we already understood his motivations from the first episode that he would be the one that comes out and be like, yo, like you put us in danger. You need to peace out here. So I like that they're keeping that consistent and that it's these characters that need to be saying these things are saying these things.
And the fact that like Matt just said there's no right answer here. This is a situation where you can understand everyone's perspective. You can understand why Katara's angry with the village for kind of betraying their idea. You can understand why Sokka's protective. You can understand why Aang's kind of in between. Okay, I don't really understand, but sure, I'm out. Fair enough. Your place, your culture. It's one of those. It doesn't have to be this great big conflict because ultimately it is only a very small scene, but it's just. It ties together kind of the ideas of each character, the ideas of the culture, and the plot as well. This is a response to a plot situation that will it's not only led from a specific place before, but is also leading to what is now to follow. It's so neatly wrapped in all of those, and I love it for it. Again, attention to detail.
There's a nice sense of you can infer a lot, even like just without too much dialogue. Like the dialogue doesn't get in the way. Like she is voicing her opinion or in her view that's even correct, that Aang hasn't done any wrong to the village. But part of what she's upset about is clearly the fact that, I just had this opportunity to like leave and like learn, and it's going away. So there's a lot of stuff packed into like these character interactions that's done very simply and elegantly and straightforward.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that because that's exactly what I was going to segue into as well, as that we already established in episode 1 what her goal was and what she wants, just as Zuko has his own goal. And it's taken away from her by, she takes away my plane, man. That was my flight. Get out of my normal. Like I don't want to be this regular normal, especially when she, in a way that Sokka has a responsibility to protect and be the man of the village. She knew, back in the day, waterbenders were like the protectors of the village, and for her not to be able to contribute in that way, especially when she has this big brother who's kind of like having that shadow over her, she's like, I would like to contribute in some way too, and my waterbending could be a way of doing that. That's just like we were back in the old days. Yeah,
and she's just as competent, if not more so in some ways, than he is. He's got his strengths, but they come later. But
But again, we see sprinkles of it for all of them. They all have potential. We see the potential, and then we see the potential for growth on top of that. You know, all in the same very small space of time, while wrapped up in the plot, while wrapped up in their character motivations and their personalities. It's you almost don't see it unless you really kind of think about it. But they did a lot in this very small space of time with the characters and the plot tied together.
The foundation of the bones were there, and they did it very well.
I feel like this
so the
scene
next
is one
scene,
of the best one that brings that out.
Yeah, it's a pretty good establishing scene, and that's how you're supposed to do your opening scenes for any kind of story. You're supposed to establish the conflict, and that is, kind of what goes up here. And then we see Aang, by himself, just kind of hanging out with Appa, and then he sees the Fire Nation fleet, or not fleet, but just the one ship, Zuko's ship, heading to the village.
Fleet, yeah.
Yeah, it's like kind of plane.
Yeah.
Maybe later.
And decides that he should save the village or help them, even though they're not asking for his help.
Yeah, and that we kind of touched on this last episode again, like where whether or not like what he does is always like the heroic thing or whatever. And I think early on, it's not so much that Aang is a hero; he's just a good person. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And like and that's like because that denial of the call or whatever, like that's a major part of his arc, like in terms of becoming Avatar. But in terms of like what makes him like a hero is just like he's a good person and he acts on that. Like whereas
he's not a Gryffindor, he's a Hufflepuff.
and despite his fear, which was mentioned previously, or shown rather previously from the previous episode, he doesn't hesitate. He's gone. He's there. He's just straight into conflict. Exact opposite what we just said a minute ago. He avoids it where possible, but if he needs to, he'll go into it. But also not abandon his principles the very next second. There's still the consistency, as we see in a minute. But that then leads us to
also he knows.
Oh, sorry.
He also knows that the village is like in dire straits and not prepared for a fight. Like we talked about, there's women and children there. It's not,
which is perfect because that is a segue to the next scene, which is them all getting ready, and you're like, oh, it's just Sokka.
Hey, those toddlers were there too. Yeah. Come on, don't disparage them. But it is really just
you're like,
I love what they did with his preparation scene as well. We see in a minute as well. It's mirrored on both sides of the conflict, but he's kind of sat there. It's showing again a bit of the culture, the kind of world development or world building side of it within the setting. He's getting war paint on. It's they give a few seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of animation, that's pretty hefty. It gives a few seconds to establish that prep work he's doing and how he's taking it seriously and how this is such a kind of core part of who he is. And I mean, there are probably some other examples earlier on as well, but this is kind of the first time we see him in serious mode where it's not kind of all just bumbling buffoon, because he's not stupid. He is smart, Sokka, but we don't really see that in the first instances of him. This is one of the few examples.
It takes a while to like come to the forefront here, but it's always been an aspect of his character, like you're saying. Like it goes back this far. Yeah. At least that he takes himself seriously, even though like sometimes his credibility is immediately undermined by his or the actions of those around him. But still, it's like he tries to keep. Yeah. But anyway,
there's a stark contrast between this huge Fire Nation ship coming into this very small village. Like when it crashes, and you have like this really nice imagery of like the nice angles of the sharp point of the ship coming through the iceberg, and then you have like just this small village that is just like decimated right now, and they really can't do much to do anything. And then that is further developed through the actual physical fight between Zuko and Sokka, which you can kind of take as like a metaphor for the bigger war that Sokka is no match against Zuko, in the same way that this little water tribe is no match for this huge Fire Nation. Yeah,
you mentioned the ship, that kind of the shot. It's a beautiful shot that they did. For starters, it builds on the tension and the kind of the fear and the threat level that's coming in on a small village. But it reminds me as well of the Star Destroyer and the Tantive 4 at the start of New Hope. It's very kind of like this: hello Empire and hello small tiny village. It's really well crafted as well, again, because it's not just showing the plot, it's not just bringing the threat into the culture, it's also showing a Sokka who is standing there and not flinching. Stupidly, granted, but he's there and he's like, I'm the last line of I'm the only line of defense for this village, and I'm going to stand my ground. There's a
cinematic language that's going on here that works. Like they're telling the story and using all of their tools at their disposal, not just dialogue or exposition.
Yeah, it really works very well. But the fight between Zuko and Sokka. As you said before, it kind of undercuts that, because there are moments where he'll stand and this is Sokka, this is who he is, and then comedic moment, and I think it's one of the flaws of these early episodes. that does tend to happen a fair bit.
What I like about what I'll say to his credit in that particular fight is that he doesn't give up. Like that, so there's that.
Right.
That's about as much credit as you can give him in that particular instance.
A small detail as well, I just want to point out, minor thing. You know when he falls into the side of the snow, and it's a quick way of getting the face paint off, because so he can, we can see his face and keep the character
that's
establishment
fine.
on.
That's animation.
I know, I like that. My point is, you see the smudges afterwards. They actually go into the level of detail and show that there is still some of the paint left. It's like, that is a small thing, but that kind of detail stands out and makes this sort of the entire show believable for me. It's like, oh, of course, it's still there, and it does go away later, but he smudges away.
I actually. Little things like that work, I think, for you, because that's your thing. There's other moments like that as well, which I'm going to touch on later in the episode, that did it for me. Like the things that I remembered from Avatar, which wasn't those sorts of details, like the realistic, like, okay, that his face was smudged, but it's something else that I got to remember. I got to log that in there. Okay, cool. So then Aang shows up and fights Zuko. And what I liked most about that is that we finally, for the first time, see like how Aang fights and his mentality in the fight. And it's very in line with his own personality, and that he's just all about deflecting, but deflecting in the sense now of attacks rather than, deflecting tough situations.
There's no retaliation going on. He's just defending. Right.
And even when he does kind of strike out and take the initiative himself, he's just creating a ball of snow to say, no, back off. It's a warning shot. If that, it's very straightforward as well. Aang blends straightforward attacks with extremely complex defensive sequences in a very interesting way that kind of fits his character. He's spent more time training in that kind of thing because that's who he is. He's focusing on that side of thing. He will always try and take the not the easy way out, but the dodge rather than the confrontation.
The path of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. He
and in this case, his goal is just to move the Fire Nation forces away from the village. It's not to beat them. Yeah.
Hammered in by that shot where he's standing there deflecting and then looks behind. The fire doesn't even touch them, but it's just close, and he's like, okay, straight away. Nope. Take me.
Yeah.
It's like, there we go. Aang and his principles being consistently told in a new way. These are all different situations being thrown at him. But he's reacting exactly as you'd expect him to.
Yeah, and I like that it was like he's wanted to surrender himself because his main thought is just, as long as they're okay, I don't really care what happens to me as long as this little village can continue doing, which is the mark of a hero, like we were saying before, that isn't someone who's trying to go out and do heroic things, but someone who is just is a hero just in and of themselves, just by being a good person and a decent, like actually caring for human life.
Yeah, he's not striving to be a hero. He just is one. It's part of who he is, and it's part of, as I said before, it's been shown that way from the day one. Even though we're on day 2, it's still important to have that consistency, and they keep amping it up.
And then that makes the village, I'm sure, the people who are like kind of on the border with Sokka, feeling kind of like, oh, well, that sucks that we like kind of kicked him out. He's a cool kid. Yeah. Which is why I believe Gran gives the Sokka and Katara her blessing when they're about to like, we have to go. Oh no, Gran's here. We can't go. And she's like, no, I'm giving you. What did she say? She gives them some supplies or food or something like that.
Yeah, just a bunch of supplies. You can't go without this. And it's also the fact that the Avatar is revealed to her as well. She talks about that spark of hope, which I think she kind of sees in Katara and Sokka, who is also gearing up to go. He's willing to do what's right. Despite what we've seen beforehand, because what we've seen beforehand is because he's trying to do what's right. It's not because, oh, you're a stranger, I don't trust you. You might be Fire Nation. It's just I'm on high alert because stranger in my very secluded village.
It's again, like you guys said, like Aang's actions probably brought Sokka around, a lot. Like in terms of because he didn't have to do what he did. He didn't have to come back. He didn't have to surrender himself. He didn't have to defend the village. He didn't have to do any of that, but he did.
Yeah, and that matters.
And that's the great. It's leading by example too, which I think is one of Aang's like main tenets, is that you lead by example, and that's how you change the world, not by forcing your principles or forcing your will on it, like the Fire Nations forcing their dominance on the rest of the world. No, you just lead by a good example, and then if you do those good things, your karma, which I believe, does karma come up in the show?
I'm not sure, actually.
I wonder what the guru later on.
Chakra comes up, but not.
Chakra for sure, which is kind of cool. Yeah. But yeah, leading by example is the best way to change. Like, as who said that? Be the change you want to see in the world. Was that either Martin Luther King, or was that Gandhi? I can't remember who said that.
That sounds like Gandhi to me. But like I'm not sure.
But that is being applied here, you know, and when that happens, we're seeing the good results of that. But yeah, okay, so we Aang is now captured. Gandhi was okay. He's
have to give him his due.
Thank you, internet. So yeah, Zuko has Aang on his ship on the top decks, and he's taking his glider away. And I thought there was like kind of a funny scene because like Zuko glider to Iroh, he's like, store this away, and Iroh takes it and like gives it to another soldier. Can you do that for me?
Could
and like
put this away from me? Doesn't even order him. He just says, "Can you?"
Will you take this glider to his quarters for me? like you know, after he was like, "Take this to my quarters for me," and like he just like repeats it. It's like a stormtrooper with the mind trick. He just says the same line to someone else.
And it's funny because the next thing we see him doing is because he wants to take a nap. Because Iroh wants to take a nap. Like that's what makes Iroh so great. He's like, I'm done with like being this fired. That's probably why he's with Zuko. Like because
he's there.
Not even the B squad. It's like the CDF squad is with Zuko right now.
Yeah, they were like the rejects. They weren't allowed into the military. Like, you can get out of here. Like, you know what I mean? It's a very like Theon Greyjoy-esque feeling here in terms of your crew is just like the worst one. But like Iroh's along for the ride for his nephew's best interests. He doesn't care one whit about what's really going on at any given time in the moment.
Yeah, unless it becomes like a moral issue for either the situation or something he has to guide Zuko on. You know, if he sees like Zuko stepping down the wrong path, he'll step in. But as we'll see,
he'll stand up for like the greater good. But like he's so rarely around when that's being determined right now. Like you know what I mean? Like he's usually just doing his own thing.
Yeah, and that's another thing the show does well. Actually, the interaction just as it comes to my mind now, between the adults and the children. You know, there are lots of shows where it doesn't make sense for even great series and such, like Harry Potter comes to mind, where the kids shouldn't be the ones solving problems, shouldn't be the ones aware of problems, like Harry Potter as well, like Philosopher's Stone. Where was Dumbledore for that? But with this here, you know,
he was
Iroh
giving Harry a lesson.
Yeah, I know. It's like, what? Arming him for his weapon, but you know, with this series, it's very good at keeping the adults separate when it needs to, but for good reasons. You know, it may not be particularly complex reasons, but you know, Iroh was taking a nap. He wasn't aware what was going on. Why would he be? So it's good at giving the kids a chance to shine without it being like, why is this happening?
Yeah, I mean, this is Zuko's quest. This is not Iroh's quest. He could go home anytime if he wanted. He's just there because, again, being a good person for his nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing's really short. It's just getting Appa to fly. The goal being just say yip, yip. Which, actually, okay, to think about that, is that just like, is Appa kind of like a dog where you like say, sit, and then like it sits, and like, and until you say that command, then that
I suppose he says it pretty much every time. Like that's like what he does in response to doing that. So it must be like when you train a horse or something, like to do something in like specifically, you know.
Yeah.
Never really goes too far in depth in terms of establishing what an air bison or sky bison's level of intelligence is, but they can be trained, they can be taught, and he seems to understand what Aang's telling him at any rate.
Yeah, very aware on a kind of, especially with the connection with their riders specifically, and they're aware of the situation, but you know, they won't just respond to you per se, unless you give them, you know, a trained response, like yip yip. I guess it's not really covered, but it's interesting. I like how it's not just a boy and his dog relationship, which is, you know, done to death.
Right.
There is a kind of, they don't explain it, but there's something more there going on between the two that's kind of subtly on screen all the time. Pays off later, obviously. And then we have Aang escaping, right?
Yeah, he says, I can take you guys on my hold on, let me ambulance is
can you mute your law enforcement, please?
Yeah, let me mute.
I'm trying to do a podcast. Jesus, what are you supposed to be doing here? Oh wait, emergency services, right?
I'll come back when I leave.
Okay.
Continue talking.
We can't hear him now, by the way, so you may as well.
Oh.
Okay. So yeah, he says he can take them. He says that they can take him with his hands behind his back, and then, you know, he like blows and then escapes them. And I mean, he should be able to escape these guys because, like we were saying before, this is like the reject squad. But it's cool to see how he does it. Seeing more airbending because this is our first time really seeing airbending in a semi-combative sense, or, you know, for use rather than just like, oh, let me just bring my glider to me, or like let me just like fly around with my glider. It's cool to see.
I like the dynamism of airbending because of like all the bending disciplines. Like it's the one where like theoretically, like I can see how you might argue this, but really you can never really separate an airbender, like unless they're dead, like because they have to have air, like from their element. So an airbender is like never really helpless, even if you have them in bondage, because it's so directly tied into like even their bodily functions. Like when he sneezed, he flew into the air. So it's like things like that, you can't really pin them down too much. They're hard to keep like under your thumb, and this shows why perfectly without saying any of that, without explaining why. It just shows it through action.
Show don't tell is very prevalent throughout the entirety of the series. I can't think. I mean, even the scenes where they are explaining things, they're doing it in a way that keeps it natural and subtle and.
Or because Aang's actually getting deliberate training, so he does need to know, like
Yeah, precisely. It just adds to, and they always tie it with character and plot. But anyway, that comes later. But I love how this is, like you say, so dynamic and varied. This is the first time we see him showing it off really, and it's he's being creative. That creation, the creativeness shines on screen. It's really good. I like the way he cuts the bondage with the helmet of the Fire Nation as well.
And I love it when he does the wall run, the spiral.
Yeah.
When he's getting around them, again, like someone like, for instance, another character who's Korra, Zahir, would just like push his way through like those group of Fire Nation soldiers, and he just goes, "Yeah, I'm just going to run around you guys." I
don't want to hurt you. I just want to get around you. So excuse me,
yeah.
Through, bye.
Just trying to get out of here.
He's the kind of character that shouts sorry over his shoulder if he trips you up and past.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the things that I was trying to bring up later, or from before, that I really like, that for me I always thought about in the show, were the really little bits of comedy with their facial expressions. Like when he goes into Iroh's room and then he sees that he's sleeping and then he just has his lips like this.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like there's always moments like that, or like the very anime faces sometimes that will pop up occasionally when they're emoting during the series. Those are the things, like those kinds of aesthetics for me is what. This is something that like makes me like the series, because you needed like a foundation, but it's the kind of thing that made me fond of it. Like those little idiosyncrasies of the series, I liked a lot. And this is like the first big major one of the major ones that I really, really like.
Yeah, Avatar, I think is. Sorry,
it strikes I was just gonna say, it strikes a nice balance between the more realistic sort of style that it goes for in terms of the way characters act and what they're capable of, and also remembering that it is still a cartoon, and it's it's on,
and to live in that space, live in that.
Yeah. Every now and then it like dips a toe in that without going too far, and well, very rarely does it do this, but it doesn't go too far into like, okay, this is just wacky like nonsense going on right now. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were you going to say?
That was literally all I was going to say. It was just the balance side of things. The difference between the kind of anime expressionism on the face being over the top is part of the style, and then not this one. It's a really good balance between the two.
Yeah, Calvin, you should take away the Zuko Aang scene.
Yes,
it's pretty phenomenal.
Because I love this scene. It is exquisite in every way. It's the choreography for one is fantastic. The animation of the choreography is extremely impressive given the limited budget the first series had. Or season, sorry. When I say series, I mean season, UK thing. But
he's UK, yeah.
But yeah, the not only that though, because that would sell the scene by itself if we're being honest, especially this early on in the series. But the thing that stood out to me was the emotion in the scene. Like you feel there because you see Aang. Like this is the first time he's really felt any threat. You've seen him going around people. You've seen him kind of say, "I can take you on," while I'm hands tied behind my back. But then you see him like, heaving gulps of air while up in the corner. He's realizing, Jesus Christ, what is happening right now? And then it follows on with more action, more very impressive and creative airbending. Again, animation great, but it's the moment where these two characters who are facing off for pretty much the first time as actual characters, they're establishing the relationship as well. So it's the amazing fight, amazing emotion, the thrill of the scene because of what's happening is very real, and you feel like you're present in the moment. And it also ties to the two characters who this is kind of establishing their conflict. These two people that will be very much, their arcs are paired together and intertwined. They're kind of mirrors of each other moving on. And I love how this is just with this one scene, it's establishing all of this.
Yeah, I really like the characterization there, like in terms of just the different ways that they're processing what's going on, because Zuko is like angry and loud and screaming and trying to desperately make everything happen right now, and Aang's just kind of calmly like letting things like go as they're going and just sort of weathering the storm, and it's just really well done. But I also like that the way that segment of the fight ends, is that sequence plays completely straight. You take it seriously, but like when he like hits him with the mattress like twice, and there's like a loud clang. Like I've heard people laugh when they're watching it, but it's not to like the detriment of the scene. Again, striking that balance between it's a cartoon and it's sort of funny, and it's also like action and drama, and like the whole sequence works really well.
Yeah. It's a perfect example of realistic comedy in place. Of course he would do that, but at the same time, it's hilarious. it's brilliant.
Mostly because of the sound treatment on it.
Oh
like
yeah,
that loud clang.
Clang.
Even the small details, like you were saying with his hands, like when he's at the back of Zuko, what he's doing is that each of his hands is on one of his shoulder blades. So anytime, we all have like that bone on the back of our shoulder blades. It pops out when you're about to like either rev up or something. So what he's doing, he's just feeling like, okay, this one's coming out. I got to avoid this way. Okay, this one's coming out. Like, he's like really, really doing all these nice defensive maneuvers, which are really cool, and very reminiscent of martial arts that they're emulating.
Yeah, Bagua is all about that kind of circular motion. And whenever they're doing the circles, it almost falls straight into the hand motions of the actual martial art itself, and they just do him so well. And again, tying them to the character, because meanwhile Zuko's kind of frowning and scowling and going as he turns around trying to blast that fire, and Aang's like almost comically, but at the same time he's like, okay, think, panic, escape, and then dance for it. About, and this was all just a scene of Aang collecting his staff. That was all that this scene needed to be, and they made it so much more, seemingly without trying. It looks effortless. These aren't things that I draw attention to.
Yeah, it's just funny you mentioned that, because when I think about it, like one of my other favorite fight scenes from like Korra is over like collection of a staff. But anyway.
Oh yeah. We'll get there. We'll get to
that way later. Yeah. But anyway.
But yeah, so you get to the top deck. The fight continues after Aang's initial escape, and Zuko tosses him overboard, and we get some things revealed.
The first time he goes into the
Avatar state. Yeah. Because he's, and we'll discover this later, why he goes to the Avatar state, but it's because he's in mortal danger. He's about to die. He's about to drown in, this southern sea. But we get the idea of, actually, when I first watched the series, I don't know if you guys thought this too, as I thought that the arrows, like before we figure out that it's just like an airbending tattoo tradition or whatever, I thought that was being the Avatar. You know what I mean? Like, especially since they glowed with it. And I was like, oh, okay, so Avatars, they all have arrow thing. Yeah. I always associated that with Avatar for the longest time.
It's definitely something that could easily be make that mistake, because I think there's a scene at one point where Katara looks at the arrows and goes, oh, that kind of thing, which might imply
at the beginning of the or maybe that's next episode.
I can't remember. I think pretty sure it was before they left the village.
But whichever one, she does.
But it does kind of draw attention to it a bit, and there's stuff to work with there. But I like that it isn't, personally. It would have been perfectly fine for that to be why you have these spiritual marks on you when you go into the Avatar state. But I like how it's to do with him as an airbender more than anything else. I don't know. It seems right.
It might have been, it's just because they glow. That's really what it is. Like in all the other avatars, all it is that their eyes glow. Like, but with airbending, air nomads, their tattoos do. But it comes up. Huh?
Sorry, which makes sense actually, because those tattoos are just in essence an expression of their spirituality, and that's what the Avatar state is. It's of course they're going to glow, which I like how again that makes sense. I
like that. Like when something like this normally happens in a work of fiction, people will call it like, what do they call it? Deus Ex Machina or whatever. Like that. Oh, he didn't really do anything, but like he still won. Like, but this comes full circle in the way that you now understand how he got to be in an iceberg in the first place,
right? And how he survived.
Yeah, and even if you don't know the circumstances, which you don't, like why he's there yet, it's still it keeps that question in your head, like in your mind, like, okay, well, what's going on here then? So it's telling the story in a cool way. And I just want to make a real quick note. It's cool. I like the way that it's the way it looks when he goes into it. But what he actually does is like one of the most feeble, like works of the Avatar state that we see.
Watch the series and come back. If you're watching for the first time, you're like, oh my god, he just made a title link.
Sorta, yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, from the perspective of re-examining it, I can't feel as hyped about it, like as I think the scene wants you to be.
At the same time, think about the avatars that are currently channeling that state. They're going to be aware of these guys' relative incompetency. They're not going to go, tsunami, destroy the ship. They're just kind of, okay, clear it away. Especially with Aang's, relatively pretty much the first time he's done this as well. So They're probably maybe not. There are reasons to explain away the kind of limitation, which kind of makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm not criticizing it too much. I'm just saying it's like
it is funny how
for the
the
viewer, like if you don't know, it's like it's not all that.
Yeah,
it's much more than this.
Yeah. Oh, and then they just Sokka and Katara watch this entire thing on Appa, and they come and save him because he passes out, which happens often because there's a lot of energy that you're outputting when you're using the Avatar state. And as we will discover, it's when you're most vulnerable as well. You know, if you die, you die. I mean, not even just you, but all your other Avatar states die.
Which I like.
But you have that moment of like, whoa, he's an Avatar. You know, establishment versus he's just not like some airbending kid. Like it's more than that. It's more important than that.
Yeah, and I like that they put that level of threat. It's not really addressed till later, I guess. So we'll talk about it in detail later.
Not till season 2.
Yeah, but I do like that it's there. It means that it's not just a reliable Deus Ex Machina that can get him out of any situation because there is a risk to it. But yeah, we'll talk about that later.
So like you were saying, like while it is kind of like a Deus Ex Machina, there at least is a consequence for using that
precisely
accelerated ability.
Yeah,
and he doesn't.
As long as you do that, I think.
Yeah,
and I think it would have been much more obnoxious if he did it every episode, but he only does it a few times a season.
Right.
So
precisely.
Yeah.
And
if it had been like
does it as well.
Yeah.
You don't tend to think,
why
don't you just flick the Avatar state on now? That doesn't come up later much.
Well, it's also because, like, as we'll discuss later, control over it is its own arc that he's not even started. So he can't do it if he. But like a lesser show, just have okay, that's ultimate power, and the bad guy has to always lose at the end of every episode. So Avatar state, and it doesn't happen like that in this show. So it's cool.
Yeah, and as I said,
next point.
Oh, sorry. Moving on. Yeah.
There was like a hang up there. I wasn't sure what was going on. I was just trying to move us along.
That's right, no problem.
Well, I think because it was cutting out a little bit. I don't know if it was for you, Callan, but
no, I think it was just a little bit.
Connection problems? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. You're fine. Yeah, because what's happening right now, and we don't know this yet, is that he's not really controlling his state. He doesn't really control his state for quite a while. It's his state actually controlling him. It's his past lives doing the work. But yeah, so then Zuko, he tries to attack again, and again, Aang being the defensive fighter he is, he doesn't. He turns the flame away, which hits the side of the iceberg and puts them, lodges them in the side of the mountain, the ice mountain. And then Zuko proclaims that he will never underestimate Aang again. So we can see that now his goal has kind of accelerated too, and he's like, hey, you know what? Like now I know who this kid is, like fully, and I know who I'm dealing with.
It's something I want to mention actually because it reminds me. Zuko seems to display a reasonable escalation of force from his perspective. Throughout this early part of the episodes, he doesn't underestimate Aang per se, or he does, but not in the way you typically show in a cartoon like this. Aha, you can't possibly defeat me, that kind of thing.
Right.
But early on with the village, he grabs the Gran. Obviously, that's a bit rough and pushes it back. But he doesn't incinerate anyone or blast any houses or anything. Obviously, this is a kids show; it can't show that level of stuff. But he doesn't lead with that. When Sokka attacks him, he breaks the spear and pushes him away. There's no I'm just going to dominate you. It's only when he gets humiliated by the boomerang flying back which fits into his character because he's all about honor, that he actually gets into rage mode and starts bringing the fire to the fight. And with the Avatar thing here, I see I like how I've been humiliated again. Look at what's happened. I'm not going to underestimate it again. I'm going to get him next time. I like how it all ties together and plot, believability, escalation of the threat of the villain meaning something, and matching his character. It's also elegant.
Yeah, like the matching his character is more like a retroactive thing because like you can construe it as just okay, he's a villain in a Nickelodeon show. There's only so much he can do, but the fact that there's more to him than just being the villain of the show that comes out more and more later, it fits in well retroactively. But I do agree with what you're saying. Yeah, completely.
The writers clearly knew what they were doing here.
Yeah.
Which is
and it also, which we're not going to talk about it right now, but it contrasts really well with certain other members of his family that pop up later. Yeah.
So that about wraps up this particular episode, doesn't it?
Wait a minute. Antoine, are you muted? You look like you were talking.
I am sorry.
You were like,
there was a fire truck that came.
Okay, sorry. I was looking at Matt. I didn't see what you're saying.
Talking, Callan, because I actually forgot what I was saying.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Is it you okay then? Sorry. Are we moving on?
I said go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. That about wraps up the episode, doesn't it? Sorry about that, Antoine.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, so that's everything, I think. I can't recall.
Yeah. I mean, they established Katara, Sokka, and and kind of pledge themselves to each other to be like, okay, let's go, do this thing. Well, not do this thing as in like let me be the Avatar and but let's go to like the north and what is that their establishment at the end? Going to the north, or is it just going to the air temple?
North Pole.
I think the north is their general
they're taking a detour.
Yeah, but they have like to go across the whole world, so they're gonna like detour other places. But it is always from this point the idea of going forward, going north. But also the most poignant bit in like most like sort of bit that's left in your mind is like they ask him like, why didn't you just tell us you were the Avatar? We're like, we met you. He's like, because I didn't want to be, and that is like a big part of his character arc, like understanding that that's central to the denial of the call aspect of like the hero's journey that most of these things go for. So that's the seed planted there, and we don't really get that story for a while, but it's nice to have it acknowledged in that way.
It's a stamp on the kind of bookend to this these first two episodes arc he's going through, because we've seen that he clearly doesn't want to be the person with this kind of responsibility. We see it, and then he confirms it, and that's it's a stamp on that, and it's a stamp on his bond with these two moving forward. This is where they become a team and it just improves from that time on. But yeah, that's this episode. That's episode 2 wrapped up. I think we've given pretty thorough thoughts on this. So do we want to just end it, or?
That's good. I have nothing else
Next time we'll be examining season 1, episode 3, the Southern Air Temple, and that'll be forthcoming.
One of your favorites. Yeah.
That was my personal introduction to the series. One of my favorite episodes of this first season for sure. So I'm looking forward to that one. Yeah. Until then, I guess we're wrapping up here. So, Grey Jedi 91 signing off.
See you next week. Ready for? I still don't have an outro.
See you guys later. Remember, be water, my friends.
And goodbye.